संस्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. Revered Swami Shuddhidanandaji Maharaj, other revered Maharajis in Advaita Ashrama, and dear devotees, I am very happy that Maharaj has invited me to address the devotees of Advaita Ashrama today. I will spend the next 30 minutes trying to explain to all of you Swamiji's central message to us. I will explain to you how our lives are at present and how Swamiji's ideas can make it better for all of us. As human beings, we have needs. These needs have been studied in depth and the learned ones have categorized them properly. All human needs do not belong to the same category. Some needs are more basic than others. Some needs are more refined than others. But the needs of one category have to be fulfilled before man starts to feel needs of the next succeeding category. That is a principle. Take for instance the need for basic food, clothing and shelter. These are fundamental for human existence. Human beings must be able to get daily food, minimum clothing and a roof over their head. If these are lacking, man dies. Man cannot survive in the absence of these needs. Hence, we can call them basic needs. Now, if a man gets a steady supply of food and basic clothing and shelter arrangements are available in life, is he satisfied? No. The moment these basic needs are fulfilled, the next set of human needs crop up in his life. He will now need good education, good quality health care and job security. Let us say even these are given to a person. What next? Is that man happy, satisfied and contented? Life's experience tells us he is far from that blessed state. He will now strive hard for achieving social prestige and status. Thereafter, he will actively seek social and public acceptance. He will then seek love and affection of the people he will call his own. And then he will actively seek the pursuit of knowledge and the fine arts. And he will want to excel in those things. Now, this latest set of needs is really subtle. It is very difficult to say that any man has fulfilled himself in all these things, that is love, acquisition of knowledge, etc. Yet, instances are not rare where we find persons blessed with huge amounts of these two. Are they happy, satisfied and contented? Unfortunately, no. Therefore, the wise ones who studied human nature in depth in our country have said that in addition to all these needs, man will have one more need, the need to overcome all these needs. It is a kind of inversion in human nature. It is a fact. A man may have everything he desires for, and yet he will not be satisfied until he lets go of everything, until he transcends his need for fulfilling his seemingly endless needs. This state of existence is a turning point in a man's journey to his destiny. We see the clearest example of this state in Buddha's life. He was born to a king. He had the love of his wife and son. He had everything a man could ever imagine, and yet hollowness gnawed at his heart. What was that need? That is what we are speaking of. the need to transcend the very tendency to have needs in life. The awakening of this last type of need is the beginning of religion. Real religion deals with fulfilling this need in us. We must appreciate that this last need is a very real need. Its expression in our personality is very visceral. We may not be able to appreciate the reality of this need, and that is why I emphasize it. Listen to a story. A bald man was once going on a boat. There were two young men on the same boat. They saw the sun shining on this bald man's head and wanted to have some fun. One of them rolled a book that he had in his hand and slammed it on the bald man's head. A loud sound was heard. The shocked bald man rose up to beat this young man. The young man stopped the bald man and said, "Sir, before you beat me, please answer a question of mine. I hit your head with my book." A loud whack was heard. "Now, did my book produce the sound, or was it your bald head that created the sound?" See the question. The bald man replied, "The pain that I am experiencing does not allow me to argue. I am unable to philosophize. I need to beat you up and get my revenge. I will have no satisfaction until I do that." Sri Ramakrishna tells a beautiful story. We find this story in the Bible also. A disciple approached a guru and said that he wanted to see God. The guru said that he would do so in due course of time. Days passed, nothing happened. The disciple started pestering the guru. One day when they had gone to the river for a bath, the guru pressed the disciple under water and held him there for about a minute. When the disciple came up gasping for air, the guru asked him, "How did you feel under water?" The disciple said, "I thought I would die if I didn't get a breath of air." The guru says, "When you feel like that for God, you will see Him." So this is what I mean by saying that this need is a very real need. Once this need arises, you will never be satisfied with some ideas or lectures or books or rituals. You will start hankering for something very real in the spiritual realm. It's a very real need. Now, when I say that this need for transcendence is a real need, I do not mean to underestimate the reality of the other needs. What we need to understand is this: there is a clear hierarchy of needs in us. The Vedic rishis categorized our human needs under two separate heads. They called it Abhyudaya and Nishreyasa. Modern psychologists such as Abraham Maslow have fine-tuned the classification into 5 different categories. Maslow speaks of physical needs, security needs, love and friendship needs, esteem, self-esteem needs, and self-actualization needs. According to Maslow, the first 4 categories of needs are called deficiency needs. Unless they are fulfilled to a certain extent, the need for the last category, that is your self-actualization, will not arise. We may safely extrapolate this logic and conclude that unless the 5 categories of needs are fulfilled up to some level of satisfaction in an individual, the last need for self-transcendence will not arise. In fact, they say that before he passed away, Maslow also recognized this last 6th need, this need for self-transcendence. Sorry. I wish to raise an important point here. We can safely assume that most people who are now listening to this lecture have fulfilled all the 5 types of needs that we have enumerated till now. That means most people who are now across the terminal, that side, should have developed a burning desire to realize God. In modern psychological language, it means that most of us here today should feel a need for self-transcendence. Are we feeling that? Do we all feel a deep burning desire within for self-transcendence? I am afraid we do not. Let us accept the fact. We do not want to let go of anything that we have now. Why is that so? The wise ones have told us that once the lower type of need is fulfilled, the next higher type of need will wake up in us naturally. If that is true, then why do we not feel any need for self-transcendence? I won't say any need. Why do we not feel a burning need for self-transcendence? Listen to a story. A lion was once training his young cub in the art of kingship. The lion said, "My son, we are the kings of the jungle. We are the strongest." That little cub with its little round eyes asked, "Is that so? Really? Are we stronger than that deer with all its elaborate antlers?" The lion roared, "What? A deer? We eat that poor animal for our food." A little distance away, in that same jungle, there was indeed a deer grazing grass. The cub had seen it. The deer also has seen this father-son duo discussing something. It was alert. The cub asked its father, "Can you show me that you are indeed stronger than that deer over there? Can you catch him?" The lion felt sorry for his little son and started running towards the deer. The deer immediately sensed the danger and started running away from the lion. You know how the deer runs when it runs away from danger? It runs in a zigzag manner, and it escaped. The lion had to return to the cub disappointed. But the lion's head was still held high. The cub could not understand the entire thing. The lion said, "Look, there is an important lesson here for you. I could not catch the deer. You know why? I was running to show you that I am stronger than the deer. The deer was running for his life." I told you this story because I wish to elaborate in some detail the reason why we have gotten into this state today. We have built ourselves on an external locus. The center of gravity of our life is outside of us, so to speak. We wish to study some course. Why? Not because we like it, but it will get us a job and I can become rich. Okay? Say we want to purchase a new car. Why? Not because I need that particular model, but because owning that model will make me appear as formidable among my people, among my friends. So things, people, situation outside of my personality drive my thoughts, feelings, actions, aspirations. That is the primary reason for this anomaly today. Again, this is because of the methods that we adopt in fulfilling the other needs. All the 5 needs. Methods have to be adopted for fulfilling the needs. There is an anomaly in the methods that we adopt for fulfilling these needs. Let me explain this to you in a little bit of some detail. This present world that we live has been built on the ideas of a handful of very influential thinkers. In fact, most of the ideas on which our world is based, on which our daily activities are designed, can be reduced to the contributions of 3 extremely influential thinkers. The first idea is that we have evolved from dead matter. Some chemicals came together. By some chance, some hydrocarbons were formed. In the right combination of heat and light, these hydrocarbons created life. From those primordial hydrocarbons came the single-celled organisms. Then by steady evolution came plants, birds, animals, and finally us human beings. This is a very important idea that lies at the very foundation of the modern world. This entire set of ideas is called Darwinism. Our self-concept arises from this philosophy of Darwin, we have evolved from dead matter. Our ancestors are animals. If we ask what will we become further, these people have no answer. Will we evolve further? Nobody can tell. Our entire education system suffers due to this lack of direction today. What should be the outcome of educating our younger generation? We don't know. The exact outcome we don't know. So an absent-minded professor hurriedly left his building, his college, and went in and got into a taxi. And he told the driver, "See, I am in a big hurry. Drive as fast as you can. I'll pay you more." 15-20 minutes later, the professor remembered. "Did I tell this fellow where to go?" He asked. "Hey, bhai sahab, did I tell you where to go?" The driver says, "No sir, you didn't tell me, but I am driving as fast as I can." This is our present situation. So the first idea on which this present world is formed is Darwinism. The second idea on which our world is based is even more bizarre. It says that all our actions are impelled by lust. All feelings are basically lust in various forms. Now, as an idea, this may not be very dangerous. It is no doubt very stupid or absurd, but not dangerous. What is terrible is the outcome of this idea. The outcome is that a healthy human being should always express his feelings. This is a positively dangerous idea. Now, in all probabilities, most of the people who are attending this program must have spent our lives before internet and social media entered our lives. We know how life was during those days. You ate something good, you told someone about it. They heard it and it ended there. Today, you eat something good, you have to post it on various social media platforms, and anyone who sees it has to like it. If they don't like it, it means that they disliked it. So everything you see and hear does not need your opinion or judgment. We can be indifferent to most of the things that enter our senses. But the present world does not approve of such indifference. You must have an opinion, a distinct stand on everything. It is no longer possible for us to say that we have a detached view of things. No, you have to get involved in everything. That is absurd. So this idea of centrality of lust in the human personality is called Freudianism. It is a very basic concept that has built our present day world. Freudianism has given rise to a much more dangerous idea called instant gratification. The idea is that if some desire comes up in your mind, we should immediately work towards achieving it. If you wait, you are repressing it. If you repress your desires, any desire for that matter, it could lead to an imbalance in your personality. This is not only absurd, it is most dangerous. Our interpersonal relations are being progressively transformed by Freudian ideas. Consequently, there remains nothing sacred or exalting in human relations anymore. When sensuality takes central position in all human impulses, feelings, thoughts, actions, it is obvious that man will become more and more like an animal. Look around. Almost all of the personality problems, behavioral problems, mental problems, and even social problems that we see in our society today arise from these extremely dangerous form of set of ideas called Freudianism. The third set of ideas that has deeply influenced the modern world is that all human actions have an economic reason behind them. All our activities are for getting money. Well, if not directly but indirectly, the end result of all activities has to be money. Even thinking, even fine arts, the only criteria applied today is, will it pay? Supposing people need something, what do? Monetize it. Again, nothing is sacred anymore. All human interactions are to be calculated in monetary terms. If something, some thought, some feeling, some sentiment does not convert into money, we must reject those things. This set of ideas is called Marxism. Although a very closely related school of thought called capitalism also deals with the same set of ideas but from the opposite perspective. You must have heard of this problem of medium maximization. I'll explain it to you. Now, does man work for money only? See, man has always worked. History tells us that our ancestors worked more than we did, not less. Was it money that drove them to work? Human activity always has some objective. We work for achieving something tangible. But dictating that all our activities must be for getting money is absurd. And yet, we live in a world created by such absurdities today. Notice how we work the whole day today, and at the end of the day, what do? We must go to a club or to a bar for relaxing. Work is not relaxing anymore. This was not the case all through human history. Work has been extremely relaxing and fulfilling for man. That is why man has always worked hard. But today, people don't want to work hard. Why? Because the joy in working has been snuffed out by this economic aspect attached to human activities. Take for instance, does anybody know the Sanskrit or the Bengali word for vacation? There is no direct word in any Indian language for vacation because that is an alien concept, that is a foreign concept for us. We never had this concept that we need to spend time to unwind after working for some time. Work was always sacred to us. The moment we started measuring money with work or work with money, the sacredness vanished. You might remember that there was a Nobel Prize winner in economics a couple of years back. He was a behavioral economist by name Richard Thaler. Now, why did this man get his Nobel Prize in economics? There's a beautiful idea behind that, you see. In the University of Chicago, this man Thaler and his associate called Christopher C. They conducted an experiment. Please carefully follow this. They designed two tasks. One was a short task of 6 minutes. The other one was a longer task of 7 minutes. The 6 minutes task would get you 1 gallon of Haagen-Dazs vanilla ice cream, while the longer task would get you 1 gallon of Haagen-Dazs pista ice cream. Now in Chicago of that period, this Haagen-Dazs was a very popular brand of ice cream, something like you have this Amul brand or what quality brand in India, like that, something like that. And it was known in Chicago that people at that time preferred vanilla more than pistachio. Pista was not that popular as much as vanilla was. Haagen-Dazs vanilla was more popular than Haagen-Dazs pista. That is why Richard Thaler and his group, they designed this task like this. You do the 6 minute task, you will get 1 gallon, huge, you see, 1 gallon of Haagen-Dazs vanilla ice cream. You choose the 7 minute task and we will give you 1 gallon of Haagen-Dazs pista ice cream. Most people chose to perform the short task since they would get their favorite brand and flavor of ice cream. This was expected. Then they brought in a minor change in the experiment. They announced that the same short task of 6 minutes would get them 60 coupons which they could exchange for 1 gallon of Haagen-Dazs vanilla ice cream, and the same long task of 7 minutes would get them 100 coupons which could be exchanged for 1 gallon of Haagen-Dazs pista ice cream. Notice that nothing changed except that a coupon system has been introduced. People were now asked to choose the task that they wished to perform. But in this case, completely contrary to expectation, over 50% of the people chose the longer task, which gave them 100 coupons, which in turn could be redeemed for an unpopular flavor of ice cream. This is called the illusion of medium maximization. People will naturally work for the desired outcome. But if you introduce a medium into the work, people will work for maximizing the medium. They forget the actual outcome. This is exactly what money has done to our work. So we are now stuck with these ideas, which I have simplified into three main inputs as Darwinism, Freudianism and Marxism. The present world that we live in is something unique. We have never had such facilities, such creature comforts, such vast opportunities for man to grow and exercise his abilities. Everyone can aspire for great things today. Value of human life is recognized in more and more parts of the world. But somehow we seem to be stuck somewhere. We have indeed come very far from where we were, but we are unable to go further. It is like that, what do you call that, bulbulaya? It's like a maze. It's like a labyrinth, you see. Supposing you are walking inside a labyrinth, inside a maze. After going some distance, you will find that you have come to a dead end. What do? You must go back and start again at a crossroad in a different direction. Now that new direction that you took does not lead you to a dead end, but it is something worse. You are now moving in circles, walking along the same path again and again. And since the roads are very long and very picturesque, you do not even realize that you are moving in a rut. You think you are moving, you think you are progressing, but it leads you nowhere. That is our present condition. A person, listen to a story. A person was walking on the road. He saw two people working. One of them was digging a hole in the ground. Another came behind him and put all the dug up mud back into the hole, closed it. Again and again these two people were doing this. This man who was observing, he saw for a long time and tried to figure out what was happening. When he could not understand it, he went up to them and asked, "Sir, what are you doing?" One of them said, "You see, we are doing a government project here on afforestation. I dig a hole in the ground, another person comes and puts a sapling in that hole, a third person comes after that and fills up that hole with mud. Today the second guy is absent. We both are doing our work. This is our present condition. It's pathetic. We have reached, you may say, an evolutionary cul-de-sac, and we are slowly beginning to realize it. Although we sometimes realize that we are going nowhere, unfortunately it does not make us re-examine our fundamental assumptions of life, our present day life. Instead, we tend to think that we got it wrong somewhere. We feel that so many others are having such great fun. I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. If only I can figure it out correctly, I will still be able to get great fun from doing the same things over and over again. Some great thinker, I think it was Einstein, who once said, "It is insanity to think that we will get a new result from our old approach." But that is what most of us are doing right now. So what I finally want to say is, we need an alternative approach to this whole thing. When I say an alternative approach, am I saying that we must go back to the old medieval ways of living? No. I wish to present before you just three ideas of Swami Vivekananda and show how they remedy this entire situation in the simplest possible manner. We must realize one thing very clearly. These ideas which have shaped our world today are not entirely wrong, but some vital ideas are missing in them. All we need to do is supply those supplementary ideas, and the whole thing will stand corrected. Let me explain this to you. As I said, Swamiji provides an alternative to this present situation. Now, when we study the message of this great man, three ideas stand out. First one, the concept of man, concept of Atman. Swamiji says, we have descended from divinity. There is a spark of divinity in us right now. Then is Darwinism wrong? Did we not evolve from animals and plants and hydrocarbons? Of course, the body and the mind did evolve from dead matter. But there is a conscious element within all of us, and that is present right now in us. And that is completely and utterly different from the body and the mind. And that divine core is the real man. The divinity in me can interact with the divinity in you. That is possible. And that kind of interaction must become a habit with us. First concept of man. Swamiji has an alternative concept of man. Second, concept of Tyaga. Swamiji says, human beings grow by self-control. Human beings grow. There is evolution possible in us, and it happens by self-control. Restraint and not random expression is the path for human evolution. We must be able to get completely attached to the things and people around us. But we must simultaneously develop the ability to detach ourselves from everything around us and be able to sit quietly for some time every day. There's a thinker. She writes a very beautiful statement. Her name is Courtney Carver. She says, I love connecting with other humans, but I need them all to go away for a little while every day too. Tyaga. Third, concept of Seva. Swamiji says that all our activities has to be done as service. All work is for character development, not just for money. Self-improvement comes from any work done in a particular method. Work leads to an expansion of consciousness. Swamiji delineated the right method of working and called it Seva. Swamiji was once asked by his disciple, Sister Nivedita. She asked him, Swamiji, what exactly is your message to mankind? Swamiji said, a very interesting answer he gives. Swamiji says, my message can indeed be put into a few words: to preach unto mankind its divinity and to enable man to manifest that divinity in every movement of life. The way to manifest divinity in every movement of life is Tyaga and Seva. Divinize the entire world. That means divinizing or spiritualizing all relations, all things, all processes, even one's own personality. Then work incessantly as an offering to the divinity in oneself and to the divinity in others around us. That is why Swamiji once said, the national ideals in India, the national ideals of India are renunciation and seva. Renunciation and service, Tyaga and Seva. What did he say? The national ideals of India are renunciation and service, Tyaga and Seva. Intensify her in those channels and the rest will take care of itself. The banner of the spiritual cannot be raised too high in this country. In it alone is salvation. This is Swamiji's words. So, the solution that Swamiji provides fulfills the lacunae in the present world situation, and it does not call for any major changes in the world situations, world systems, or in our lives. We need to firmly drive in only three ideas: divinity of man, renunciation, and service. Now you may ask, are we not oversimplifying the issues here? Can a mere idea change our situation so much. Whether we think of man as evolving from dead matter or descending from divinity matters so greatly in its outcomes. Now, the unfortunate thing is we hardly recognize the power of ideas. Listen to a story. An interview was going on. The interviewer asked a question. He told his boys who were there, he told them, imagine that you are on the 15th floor of a building. Where are you? On the 15th floor of a building. And that building has caught fire from the ground, from the bottom. So there is a roaring fire in the elevators, in the staircase, and even in the fire escapes. How will you escape? This is the question he asked. So you are on the 15th floor, there is fire everywhere from the ground. How do you escape? How do you come down? Many people tried many answers. One fellow said, I will jump. You can't survive a jump from the 15th floor, you will die. Okay. Another fellow said, I'll go down the staircase, I'll run. You can't dash through. There's still fire, it's easily. See, bottom fire always goes up, you see. You can't escape. So there was basically no way out. All answers were wrong. But these boys caught the interviewer. They asked him, what is the correct answer, sir? That man says, stop imagining. Why? Because see how it was framed? Imagine that you are on the 15th. From that imagination started everything. Stop that imagination. So it's just one idea, you see, but then it changes the whole damn thing. So that is the power of ideas. Swami Vivekananda offers us some very simple ideas which can change our lives if we accept them wholeheartedly. I thank you for patiently listening to what I had to say. I once again offer my pranams to revered Swami Shuddhidananda Ji Maharaj, President Advaita Ashrama, for having given me this opportunity. Thank you very, very much. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Paramastu.